Hey, this is SportsSlaw with Lomas Brown, the pro.
And Deb Schneider, I'm the prof. And together, we're the pro and the prof.
Well, welcome to SportsSlaw. Today we are really thrilled to have two professional broadcasters. We have Dan Miller here. And Lomas, you and Dan work together. You're the voice of the Lions. I'll let you do the intro because you can do it so much better than I can.
Well, Deb, it's always good seeing you, always good hanging out with you. We get to talk about current things. And yes, Deb, we got a special guest, my partner in crime, the voice. I call him the voice, Deb, because this man can make a field goal sound exciting.
I know, I've heard.
So he's just awesome. So Dan, I'm the young guy. I'm going into my third year, but this will be Dan's 16th year doing this. So Deb, I just learned so much about being a broadcaster, being a professional, how to prepare to do my job through just watching Dan and trying to emulate some of the things that he does, even though he don't know that. I try to emulate some of the things that he does. So voice, it's great to have you on tonight.
It's good to see you, Deb. It's great to be with you. Lo, it's good to see you, man. It's been a long time. And it's, this is kind of, I don't think you realize sometimes the lack of human interaction that we've had during this quarantine and the people that you've missed. Now, we've started to get out there more and more now, but, it's like sometimes you see people and you're like, wow, I haven't seen you in so long. And, it's good to see you and great to be with you guys.
Yeah. And, we always talk about breaking bread. Deb knows I love to say that, too. So I can't wait to get back to some type of normalcy so we could get out there and break bread and try to get it back to the norm that we had before this pandemic and stuff. And Dan, I know, man, it's changing. Rapidly and seem like daily, especially, in our profession, what we're doing. Let me ask you this. I know right before the season, you have a particular way of preparing and getting ready for the season. But because of this pandemic, how is that going to change how you prepare or get ready for this season this year?
Lo, I think it depends on what we're allowed to do. Look, all I can do is speculate. The NFL at some point is going to come out with guidelines for the media and how they're going to allow things to be done. But, my guess is we are going to have very little, if any at all, interaction with the players. I think this is a year where we are going to be kept far away from them. Our interactions are going to be on Zoom or some type of platform like that. So, you might not be able to gather as much information as you have in the past because you might not have the availability to players that you've had in the past. But look, I think if this has taught us anything, it's that we can adapt to anything, and we have to. Mm-hmm. It is a new normal, and the normal changes from day to day, as you alluded to, Lomas. So in essence, I think it is all of us that have just said, okay, what does today present? What are my restrictions? How do I deal with this? And then we move forward. And I think that's what the season's going to be.
Well, I've been reading a lot about broadcast, and obviously you depend on original content.
Sure.
And if you don't have a game, and we were talking about that just before we went on. Yeah. You don't have a game, so you don't have original content. How do you create original content?
Well, I think when this began in March, and on March 11th, all the leagues shut down. Right. I think we kind of looked at each other and said, how in the world are we going to fill a sportscast every night? Well, I'm really proud of what my folks have done at Fox 2 with Jennifer and Woody and our producers, Matt and Greg. They have gone out and through Zoom and through platforms like that, created content, talked to athletes, found stories, just different things, just opened our eyes to things that we might not have looked at before this. So I think we've been challenged. I think we didn't know exactly how it was going to work at the beginning. But once you get into it and it becomes that new normal, you just realize that your eyes are open, that everything can be a story And that might be a part of the 5, 6, 10, or 11 o'clock news. And that's really the way that we've operated. And again, I'm really just so proud of everybody on our staff at Fox 2 and what they've done, because this has been unlike anything you possibly could have prepared for, or maybe everything you did in broadcasting before this did prepare you for this moment, but you never knew that it was going to come and you couldn't have predicted it.
Yeah. So Dan, let me ask you this. Do you feel that this could be worked in another way? This could be a boom for the broadcasting industry. I mean, again, we know when things do go back to whatever the norm's going to be, it'll probably be without fans. So the broadcasters know they'll have a lot more eyeballs on their TVs. They know they should be able to sell their sponsorship packages for more. Do you think this is working in their advantage? Do you see if that does work in their advantage? Do you see them trying to keep some semblance of this, even if we do get back to?
Well, I think it's interesting because Mike O'Hara's got a saying, longtime sports writer for the Detroit News, now at DetroitLions.com. And he always says there's 3 ratings points inside of Ford Field every Sunday. Well, there's not going to be anybody inside of Ford Field, or maybe a limited crowd. We don't know that yet. They could certainly spread people out, social distancing, and there could be some people there. But look, I think if we have found anything out, you can look at it 2 ways. One, we can make do without some of this, and without games, and we will live. But number 2, we don't want to do that. We love these games. They help us take our minds off of things. So I think people are going to appreciate having them back. I think they're anxious to get them back. You've got NASCAR, you've got golf, you're starting to see soccer overseas. So I think that in essence, we are very, very, lucky to have what we've got. And I do believe that people will be appreciative of it when it comes back as well, because they've known now what life is like without it. They've known what it is to look up at 7 o'clock and not be able to turn on a ball game, or look up at 10 o'clock and not be able to watch a late game from the coast. And maybe those are things that we just took for granted before. I don't think now, having lost them for several months, that we're going to take it for granted again. I think people will just kind of look at it and be happy that it's back. I think baseball, basketball, hockey, and then football coming in after that.
It's just so interesting to me, though. I'm a sports fan, not a professional player, obviously, but quite frankly, I'm loving some of these stories. I love getting into somebody's living room. I had a great time. I thought that the NFL draft was actually phenomenal.
Yeah.
I got to see that. So
Deb, it has really called on people to be creative.
Yes.
And you're right. We've seen some great stories, and we have found that there's more to a lot of these guys than just playing games. And, we've seen players, helping others, doing what they can within the community to make sure that people who need help are helped. We've seen players stepping up for social justice all over the place. That has been a big part of what we have watched unfold here over these months. So I think it's been really good in that regard. And I think that's a great observation, that we've learned so much more about the depth of some of the athletes that maybe we wouldn't have known about if this hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Right.
We had.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, we had a great podcast with Tracy Walker from the Lions.
Yeah.
And what I learned and what I loved was the fact that he has 7 dogs.
Yes.
And those 7 dogs are all named after Greek gods.
Yes.
Never would have expected that.
No, and you don't get to know it. And there's so many guys, just for the beat that Lo and I are on Sundays, there's so many guys with the Lions that are so well thought out and have such interesting lives outside of Allen Park that you don't normally get to see. So I'm glad that people do get to see that.
And here we have the draft. I'm sorry. Here we have the draft going next to us.
And this is, the NFL first didn't know if they should do it. And then they said, we're going to do it. And then they didn't know how they were going to do it. And then they figured it out with the broadcast networks. And everybody to a man just said, you know what? It was fantastic. It was great just watching these young men with a life-changing moment, and these general managers in their offices, at home with their families, and just it gave us something we hadn't had before. And I think people walked away from it saying, you know what, give us more of that. We liked it.
Yeah. Dan, this may be an unfair question, but how do you think that we know it's going to be protests? The players have basically said that. And I'm just talking about football right now. And we know what happened last time when the players did protest peacefully. It became a big thing where the owners tried to push a rule, keep the guys in keep the guys in before the game if they didn't want to stand for the national. What's your thoughts on this time around? How do you think it's going to go this time around? And I'm talking between the owners and the players, because that's where it seems to be the disconnect. That I know the commissioner, what he came out and said, but we hadn't heard much from the owners. So it seems to be a disconnect between the owners and the players. What are you expecting this time around?
Number one, Lomas, I think there is a portion of our population that will never be okay with somebody kneeling for the national anthem. That's just a fact. I do think that percentage has gone down since Colin Kaepernick in 2016. So I do think there's more people that realize now that if we had spent more time discussing the cause that he was trying to shed light on than the way in which he was trying to do it, it would have been a more productive time. Again, there will be people that will never agree with it, but I do believe that there will be protests before games. I do believe that you will have players kneeling. This is my opinion only. But I think if anything, my guess is you might have entire teams doing that, because I think in listening to some of the Lions players, listening to Frank Ragnow talk about how this has been enlightening for him, I think across the board, Black players knew that this was a part of life. I don't know if every white player who had not lived that life truly understood it until we got to the point where we are right now. I think there will be unity among teams. Doesn't mean all 53 guys, but I think it'll be a higher percentage of them together. And I do believe in the end, Lomas, my opinion, they will have the blessing of ownership to do that. I think Goodell was out in front of it. I don't necessarily think he makes that statement unless he knew that a bulk of the owners were behind him. But I find it hard to believe in the state that we're in right now, with the awareness that there's been brought to this and the sensitivity, that you're going to have an owner that threatens a player that if they kneel, there's going to be X consequences. I just don't see that happening. I think I just that would not be the number one. It wouldn't be the way to show players that you truly understand what's going on. I think that's first and foremost. So I think we have really seen a transformation here and an enlightening here of a lot of people of what Colin Kaepernick was talking about. And I do think because of that you will see more players together, more teams together, and more owners that are accepting of their players trying to voice their opinion and voice their way of bringing light to this subject.
I think, I agree with you. And I do think that Commissioner Goodell would not have said that statement if he didn't feel that he had, he reports to the owners. I mean, from a legal standpoint, they're his employers. Yep. And he has to make sure that he does walk a very, very fine line here, because, the message that Colin Kaepernick was trying to send really got changed. We talked about it getting hijacked and moved. But literally in 2 months, we've seen such a metamorphosis in this country.
We have it. And the thing is, Deb, it doesn't have to be kneeling. I'm not saying that it will. I'm not saying that it won't. It doesn't have to be. There can be other ways that teams come together and say, this is the way that we want to bring about awareness of this. The Lions, back in 2016, I think it was, banded together as a team and said, we're going to stay together as a team, and got together with ownership to create a system whereby they could be active within the community and raise social awareness and bring about social change.
Mhm.
So I think that the conversation will be more widespread. I don't know if it will be kneeling. It may be something else throughout the week or some other way of bringing about awareness. But I do think it will be more of a united effort now than it was in the past.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree. Again, I just think if this time has shown us anything, I really believe it's what I said a moment ago. If we had spent more time on the cause than talking about whether or not his way of pointing it out or shedding light on it was right or not, we might not have had to deal with some of the things that we've had to deal with. We would have had a head start on changing some of the things that need to be changed to improve that relationship between African Americans and police. And I really believe we're having the conversation now in a lot of ways that we should have had several years ago.
Yeah.
We've talked about that.
Yeah. What's your feelings on the thing with baseball now? I mean, the labor disagreement going on with baseball.
Yeah.
They're saying that they won't play unless they get 100% of their check. And then also, boys, you got the basketball players now, the NBA players. Kyrie has a coalition of players, and that they don't really come back. And there's two reasons. They're saying the virus is part of the reason, but also they feel that if they come back, it's going to distract from the Black Lives Matter, the protests that's going out there. What's your feelings on what's going on in the sports world like that?
Well, I think they're two separate conversations. I think where baseball is concerned, it appears they're working towards a deal as of tonight. The commissioner basically indicated that today. That was about money. That's all that was about. That was about money. Now, look, they have to put the protocols in place, make sure the players are safe, but make no bones about it. The difference between the owners and the players in baseball was about money, period. In the NBA, I think some of the guys, based on what I have seen, are looking at this bubble situation in Orlando and saying, I don't know about this, man. I don't know if it's safe. I don't know if I want to go down there and be separated from my family and friends for 3 or 4 months. So I think that's the conversation they're having. And I do believe that as well, there's an absolute element of them wanting to do the right thing in terms of social justice. And I think what the NBA in the end is going to have to do is incorporate some things within this bubble down in Orlando to allow the players to be active in bringing about social change, to use their platform in Orlando to bring about conversation that can help lead to social change. And I think that's probably what the NBA is working on right now. So I think there's several different conversations within that. Baseball, I think we're getting there. Basketball, there's a couple of conversations that are ongoing. One is about, I think, just the setup. And the other is about what I think many players have voiced concerns about is that they do want to make sure that they are using their platform correctly to bring about social change.
Yeah, one of the really interesting things about this happening with basketball in particular is that basketball players tend to be noticed as players, whereas in football and baseball, it's more of the team.
Yeah.
But when you look at the highest paid athletes and you look at the endorsements and you look at all of that, basketball players have a very different platform. It'll be interesting to see how they use that.
They do. Look, it's basketball players. It's a lot easier to sell tennis shoes than it is to sell baseball cleats. It's a lot easier to sell tennis shoes than it is to sell football cleats. So, I mean,
why is that?
Well, I mean, you don't wear baseball shoes around the house, and you don't wear baseball shoes out to get something to eat or football cleats or anything like that. You do wear Jordans. So, I mean, it lends itself to a different sort of ability to put a product out there. And I think, one thing that the NFL has battled for a long time too is get see players' faces. You see LeBron James' face every time he's on the court. It is difficult to see under the helmet. I did, some years ago, a show for the NFL Players Association which they, in essence, wanted to introduce people to the player under the helmet because so many of them never, were able to tell their stories. And on Sundays, they're covered up. So I just think it just seems that basketball in so many ways lends itself to a culture that people are, I don't know if more comfortable with, sells more easily. I don't know how to put that. I think baseball has struggled for a while with how to sell their stars and how to promote their stars. And I think they're still trying to figure out how do you make people understand how great Mike Trout is or how cool Mike Trout is or things like that. So yeah, I think I just think it's one of those things that is basketball for a while has just seemed to really be the sweet spot for that type of thing.
Yeah. So let's talk a little Lions if we can.
Let's do it.
That's what me and you cover. Dan, I was really impressed with their draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things. Low, as as a guy that was drafted once, you don't know for a couple of years. But I think if you look at what they did, got the best cornerback in the draft in most people, pretty much everybody's opinion in the first round. Many people's opinion got the best running back in the draft in DeAndre Swift. Got a pass rusher, which they definitely need in the third round. Got two guards to come in and compete for that offensive line. Got an explosive running back and drafted a couple of defensive tackles that can come in and compete. So I think they checked all the boxes. Now it's just a matter of, and this better than we do, of those guys coming in and showing that they can play in this league. And they're going to be a little bit behind the eight ball and that they haven't had an off season to be on the field. But in terms of talent and in terms of understanding what they did and why they did it, I agree with you. I loved what they did, but it's really now it's about, are these guys who we think they are?
Right. I agree with you. And you're right. They are behind the eight ball, like you're saying. These guys have had no all season. They won't have all season. And there's just so much unknown with them. When are they going to camp? When they go to camp, how does camp look for those guys? So, I really feel bad for those young guys this year because this is some extraordinary circumstances to be under. And like you said, then they're going to have to come out playing because just looking at the schedule, opening up with Chicago and having a couple of divisional games early in the year, it seems like, if you don't start good or have at least a 500 start, you could be out of it early. And that's a little different. It seems like it's going to be a little different this year than it has been in the past.
Well, we've talked about it before. You only play 16 of them, so they're all important. And I think that, you would have loved for those young guys to have been able to get on the field with some of the veterans and get a comfort level. It's just, we don't know, Lo, as you said, what training camp's going to look like. It could be extended. They could bring them in a couple weeks early. They could knock off a couple of these preseason games, which has been discussed, to give them more practice time. So every team is in the same boat. They've all had a virtual off season where they've been able to introduce their rookies to verbiage and theory and scheme and the way that they want to do things. But I do think that they will be, certainly behind young players that we've seen in the past, just simply by virtue of not having that on the field mini camps and OTAs that other players have had.
Yeah. Do you think they can have a slight advantage? I'm thinking maybe with, you got guys like Trey Flowers, you got Jamie Collins now, you got guys that have been in Coach Patricia's scheme before. You think that'll be enough? Danny Amendola, some of the guys that he's brought in, you think that'll be enough?
Well, I think that to me their advantage is on offense, where they've got a lot of guys coming back and they got their quarterback coming back. If I was breaking in a new quarterback this year, I'd probably feel I'd have some trepidation just because he hasn't been able to get that offseason work. I think bringing back a guy like Stafford gives you an advantage on offense. Look, I think defensively, the fact that these guys, Duron Harmon and, as you said, Jamie Collins and the guys that they've brought in, I think that helps that they've been in the system.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they have to go out there and play. And this defense wasn't very good last year. It's my biggest question going into the season. So I do think the familiarity helps, but I also think that these guys have to be together and play and begin to learn to function as a unit together. And I think that's going to be important because you're going to obviously have a pretty decent number of new starters out there and guys that are playing prominent roles for this team that haven't been out there before.
Yeah. So if you could, outside of Matthew Stafford, give me maybe one or two people you think need to have a big impact for the Lions to go to the next level.
Well, I think
Matthew.
I think offensively, collectively, they have to run the ball. I just think you can't go out there week after week and just have half an offense. So that's not one guy. That's DeAndre Swift and Kerryon Johnson and Bo Scarborough and the offensive line and TJ Hawkinson stepping up and coming back, better understanding of what the NFL is in his second year as so many tight ends, are slow to start in this league. I think defensively, look, got to pressure the passer. They got to make somebody uncomfortable. And that's Trey Flowers. And that's Jamie Collins. That's why he's here. That's the two Okwaras finding a way to get back there and get out to the quarterback. It just, Lomas, you and I sat there last year and watched quarterback after quarterback after quarterback just, slice this team up. If you don't make quarterbacks uncomfortable in this league, I don't care who they are, they're going to beat you. So, they got to figure out some way to do that. I really believe, just by virtue of coming back from last year, they could be better because I think guys can lift their performance. And I think guys underperformed last year. But for me, I love this team's offense. I think it's going to be really good. Mm-hmm. Defensively, I got questions, but I do see ways and guys that if they perform, it could be pretty good. And it could surprise some people, but it's going to have to for them to win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be a really different season. One of the things we're getting a couple questions on is how the Lions, the NFL, all sports are really going to be different without fans. Because even if we have fans coming in, how does that affect the play? I mean, it's a different world out there right now.
Yeah, I would defer to Lomas. I mean, we may or may not have a fraction of the stands filled. That remains to be seen. It will be, strange to call a game if you don't have crowd noise. And look, we don't even know where we're calling the game from. We could be calling the game from a studio. I mean, that's the kind of conversations that are going on right now.
Back in the old Ronald Reagan game.
Yeah, it is. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. With a little, with a little sound effects for hitting the ball. It's just one of those things that could be the case. So, man, Deb, I don't know what it's going to look like. I know there's going to be two teams out there, but I mean, I would defer to Lomas on that. Lo, what would it be like if you had no fans or, 10,000 fans or something like that? It would be different.
It is. And I early in the season with the excitement of the season just starting, you could bring your juice. You could generate your own juice. I just think when you start getting into the season and you're a little beat up and your team isn't as good as you thought they were going to be at the end of the season, and maybe you got a player or two missing because of the COVID or whatever, I think fans could play a big part in keeping you uplifted, keeping you going throughout that week, and especially on Sundays when you're playing, man, a 3rd and 1, and you've been on a 12-play drive and you're a little tired, and you get them 20, 30, 40,000 fans behind you, it could really give you that little juice that you need. So you're right. It's just going to be different just going out there and just getting ready, I think, for those players, just even getting prepared for those. And voice. I mean, we're gonna have to bring our own juice up there in the
How's it gonna be different for broadcasting?
No, it will be different. And I did do a game once where we lost our crowd mic, and it was one of the very few sealed booths that I've ever been in. So in essence, I couldn't hear the crowd. I didn't have it coming into my ears, and it's very disconcerting when you're getting excited and you don't hear the crowd. It's really, you're so self-aware of you're almost like, why am I shouting? I'm not shouting over the crowd. I can't hear the crowd. I'm just getting excited about a play, and it's a very lonely feeling, but it will be different for us. Again, we don't know if we'll be in the stadium, in a studio somewhere. We don't know. All that's to be decided. But let me say this. To everything you just said, Lo, you're exactly right. But here's what's going to happen. God willing, and everybody being healthy, they're going to play this season, and somebody's going to be successful, and somebody's going to be good and win a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So go do it.
You're right.
I mean,
you're right.
None of that stuff is going to stop somebody from celebrating in February of 2021 that they just won a Super Bowl. So find a way to go do it, because these games are going to count. They're going to go in the record book. And whether there's anybody in the stands or not, this season's going to matter.
You're right. You absolutely.
Yeah, no asterisks. Everybody's under the same.
Not the way we're looking at in the NFL right now. I mean, maybe there will be one in baseball, but in the NFL right now, as we sit,
baseball's a different sport.
Well, but baseball, I mean, you might only have 60 games or something like that. But even with that, even if you're only playing 60 games in baseball, somebody's going to win the World Series.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to go out there and make the playoffs and win the World Series and have a ring for the rest of their life. So go do it.
You're right.
So what do you think about piping in crowd noise?
I like it. I like it in particular for the broadcast, as they've done with soccer, the Bundesliga. They've piped it in. Now, I know originally the players couldn't hear it. I don't believe that's changed. I don't know. But they did a great job piping it in for the broadcast. And I think in terms of watching it, it made it a much more comfortable watch for me. I am a proponent of finding a way to do that, of giving it some ambiance. I think that's important to do, because I think it just makes you feel more comfortable and with your surroundings that you're used to. So I'm all for that. I think it'll be interesting to see if they try to do something like that within a stadium, or play music, or try to add something, because the silence of just watching two teams play, if there's no fans, and we don't know if that's going to be the case, the silence of watching two teams play, I think it'd be kind of eerie, be a little bit weird inside there. But I'm a fan of finding some way to add that crowd noise.
Yeah. We definitely know we're going to have some storylines come out of this year too. Because like you say, Dan, it's not a matter, like they're saying, they know we're going to have positive cases in all the sports. We're seeing them now. So their thing is, how do they deal with them when they happen? To keep it from spreading to the team, and becoming a real problem with some teams by decimating teams. So they know that it's just a big thing. It's just such a big unknown. I talked to Mark Glenn and equipment manager, and their thing is now is, do we wipe down the helmets each and every time these guys come off the field? Shoulder pads. Remember, shoulder pads, you never had to wipe those down before. That was something you might disinfect once a year. Now that's an every year thing. Spacing these guys out where they're 6 feet apart in the locker room, and you bringing the, it's just a lot of things that they're trying to put in place that I just don't see how possibly they're going to be able to do that. I'm out here at Bloomfield High School, and we're trying to keep our high school players social distancing, and it's not working. I mean, be kids. They're going to talk. They're going to hug. They're going to get with each other. They're going to be around each other. So, so we know now that we're going to have positive cases in the high school. So it's just something I guess we'll be dealing with. It'll be a way of life that we just have to deal with, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is certainly a part of our new normal again. And I know that's an overused phrase, but it is a part of our new normal now. And, there's, you hear and see discourse arguments every day about wearing masks, not wearing masks, things like that, which people can have their own opinion on that. But I'm a proponent of being as safe as we can and getting through this as quickly as we can. And the way to do that in my mind is to be as safe as you can. And I do think that the NFL and other sports are doing everything they can to put the protocols in place to lessen the chance that they have those types of outbreaks. But look, Lomas, sports mirrors society. And these guys are not going to live in a bubble. They're going home. And as they go home, they're going to face the possibility that they're going to be infected regardless of what sport you're playing. So you're right. It's going to happen. It's just you hope that you can get out in front of it and not make it a situation where there's a cluster of 20 guys that end up getting it. That's the nightmare scenario of all nightmare scenarios.
Yeah, 20 guys on a team that would ruin the season.
We've seen types of things like that where people have come out of crowded nightclubs and you have had a cluster of infections. So that is something that is very real that they're going to have to deal with in every sport where you have guys grouped together.
Right. Well, I think football is a really big one. We talked with Dr. Rodney Rode, an epidemiologist, and he was telling us about transmission. And it's a respiratory illness. You are close and you are hitting every single play. You are on top of each other every play.
Yes.
You can't play it with a mask all the time. So even if you're social distancing in the locker room, I'm going to say almost who cares? I'm sorry I said that, but but realistically, you're going to get it on the field. If somebody,
you're social distancing after you've spent all day slamming into somebody and then 60 minutes on Sunday slamming into somebody. So I think the hope is that with a significant amount of testing, they'll be able to stay in front of it and figure out if somebody's positive, and if they are, get them off the field. Look, I'm not being Pollyannish. I think it's inevitable that this is going to happen. You just hope that you have the protocols in place that you can stay out in front of it as best as possible.
So, Deb, I'm gonna throw this law question at you real fast. Now, I'm saying,
make it work.
I'm seeing everywhere where they got players signing waivers. So my question to you: is there anything in that waiver that may help the school out against the player if the player might want to come back a little later if he catches it? What do you think some of those waivers are kind of containing that these players are signing?
Well, I think the first waiver that I would have would be an assumption of risk. If you get it, you can't sue the school, you can't sue the team, you can't sue. That would be the first piece of it. But then it goes beyond that, because what if you give it to somebody else, or what if it affects your scholarship? Or what if it affects, your salary? At what point? What if you end up retiring because of it? And so there's going to be a lot more there. I think the insurance companies are actually going to have to do some stepping up on this one, because there's a lot more than just, you're not going to sue me because you got it on the field. Or if you're talking about,
that's a great point.
Yeah.
If there is something that affects a career long term, we've heard of lung damage from this disease,
right?
Those are all things that I am sure there are very highly paid people in the NFL offices with teams and in New York that are paid to think of these things. But that's a great point.
Yeah. Even that bubble situation, right? You're calling it a bubble. So by calling it a bubble, you're saying that it's supposed to be safe. Am I right by saying that? I'm just looking at how, the NBA and, they're starting to word things a little different. They don't want to call it a bubble. They're saying because they know it's not going to be 100% safe, that somebody could get infected in that. So, I just, even on the high school levels, every day when I go over to the football field, I have to take a questionnaire, and I have to get my temperature tested and everything. But again, they're already talking about having these players sign waivers. And Dan, like we've said on the show before, it's not really for the players. It's not for their safety.
No.
Mothers or grandmothers or something susceptible for it, because most of the players, they're young, they could fight this off. A lot of them don't even know that they have it, but it's like I say, the older people that they can affect and can really die or be affected by this disease or this virus.
And Deb, you can speak to this because it's, it is law, but it's fascinating because we haven't been here before. We're figuring this thing out as we go. So all these things that we're talking about, we're scratching the surface on some of the issues that may come into play that we never dreamed of before, because this just isn't anything that we've ever had to deal with before. And now everything that we're talking about becomes part of a wide-ranging conversation in terms of player safety and how it could affect them in the long run.
Absolutely. You've always, not only do you have the players, but we've talked coaches. The coaches are the ones who are generally older and who are in the higher risk group. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're talking about a bunch of high school players, fine. Their coaches are still 50 to 60 years old. That's a high risk group. Those are the ones who are getting it, and they're coming home to their families. And you're not talking about something that's going to affect just the player. You're talking about something that can affect an entire community, actually, because, I mean, once I give it to my grandmother, and my grandmother is in a nursing home, you've got it in a nursing home. That's where I think you're really, really going to see a lot of issues with it.
And it's you got a lot of states where it's not going down right now. So
no,
it's a, not to use the term in the wrong way, but it is a fascinating time because we've never seen anything like this before. We're all learning as we go, and what we think we know on Thursday feels like it often changes on Friday.
What I woke up with this morning is not the same as what I'm going to bed with tonight.
Yes, it's exactly right. It's exactly right.
I'm being told that we are running out of time. So do we have any final thoughts? I could probably talk about this for hours, especially when we start getting into law.
Well, Voice, I would love for us to revisit once things start up for us. If we could come back on and revisit and talk about how things are going and some of the biggest differences that we see that's going on. And I just like what you said, Dan, I agree 100%. We got to go out there. We got to play the games. Why not Lions? Why not?
Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to win. Somebody's going to
feel great. It's going to be the Lions.
Somebody hopefully is going to have a parade if it's not all about social distancing. But in February, somebody's going to have a parade. And why not down Woodward? So let's see if we can make that happen. But
we're set up for it.
I thank you guys for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dan. The Voice.
Thank you.
The Voice. That's him. That is him.
And thanks everybody for listening. Check us out on SportsSlaw. Check us out on our Facebook page, Detroit News Talk Radio, as well as Twitter and SoundCloud. Thanks, everyone.